Hello, everybody. Welcome to our recording of the Plot Holes podcast. Welcome to the Plot Holes, where a couple of jackasses stretch credulity and mock artistic vision to tell you what's wrong with multi-million-dollar movies, most of which are older than our target demographic, but not this one. I'm Macron,
And I'm Dirty Invincible,
and
and
we
we're
are
plot holes.
the Plot Holes. Are we
The
the
plot
Plot Holes?
holes.
We're
The
Plot
plot
Holes.
holes. We're the plot
We,
holes.
we are the Plot Holes. Okay, went together. 1, 2, 3. We are
We are the
the
plot
plot holes.
holes.
Yeah. Okay. We're never gonna get that down, I don't
Yep.
think.
Right.
All right. So today we are looking at a 2023 movie, Knights of the Zodiac. So why did we pick this movie, Dirty? Why?
Yeah, so last time, we did um Hackers, and that was kind of an older movie. So I want to do something that was a little bit more recent and something that was kind of sci-fi or more fantasy than kind of more realistic, gritty stuff. And I figured, because Hackers was an easy one, but it was a surprise and it wasn't. I figured fantasy is harder to do, so maybe it'll actually be easier to do. And I kind of was right about that. um, but yeah,
And I want to say because we were just talking about what the movie, what movie to do, and it was just so to be fair to myself, first off, I had never seen this movie before, so I had no other than I knew kind of what it was about because a friend of mine who I used to work with is a huge fan of Knights of the Zodiac, the anime specifically, I believe. Um, and so I had heard a lot about it, and I kind of knew what was going on, but I definitely wasn't. I wasn't sure what to expect from the movie, other than I was pretty sure it was going to be bad. But I figured also that a live action adaptation of an anime is a live action adaptation of an anime that was adapted from a manga would also probably give us pretty good fodder for what we're looking for here, which is actual plot holes and problems with the movie.
yeah, yeah. When you said "Nice the Zodiac," I did kind of audibly groan because I've already seen it, and I'm a bit of a fan of the anime itself, and I was very disappointed with it when it came out. I would actually say that the Dragon Ball movie was a more faithful live action anime
Really?
adaptation. Yeah, yeah.
Oh man,
I said it. I said it.
that's
And that
another
one's
one we should
notorious
do,
for being pretty bad. Yeah, we should
right?
definitely do the Dragon Ball movie for sure. But that said, a little bit of a disclaimer: the anime itself wasn't a faithful adaptation, and there was even a whole story arc made up for the anime that wasn't in the manga, and that's actually pretty common in a lot of
That's
manga to anime adaptations, and
that's how
then
you
to
get a
like
lot of filler,
movie
right? Usually,
adaptations. You do. Well, also because you do have to take that into account that on the TV on a show you actually do have to make up filler, even in the same like story arc, just to pad in time because of the way that timings work. And so you're kind of just used to like, yeah, okay, they throw some extra stuff in there for a little bit extra embellishment, but nothing is really too far off, and it's actually not that unfaithful to the manga.
oh, okay.
But yeah, it still isn't like a perfect adaptation. And I do want to say like um, there's even like live action uh stuff that's released in Japan as well that is an adaptation of a popular manga or anime or a movie, and it's not the same, and it's not like it's uncommon or that it's like solely something that we have here in the U.S. with adaptation issues. Like
Oh
it's
yeah.
rife there as well. And
Well, I
so,
see. Yeah,
um,
what's it called? The Rurouni Kenshin is another good example of a manga to
I actually
anime to
liked
live
that one.
action. That was a good
Yeah,
live action. I also think another good live action adaptation is I haven't seen the latest one, but Full Metal Alchemist has a couple
I
of
haven't seen that one.
live action adaptations too. That the ones that I have seen they're obviously they're cheaper. They're not huge big budget movies, so there's a lot of cheesy CGI and a lot of cheesy props and stuff like that. But
For
like
sure.
they're faithful, but like you said, they have to kind of, I mean, especially because the format is way different each time you make that
It
transition,
is.
they have to add something to kind of adjust the way the story works or everything like that. So
Well, and even then, like the Saint Seiya. So Knights of the Zodiac is based on Saint Seiya, which is the name of the manga and the anime. And even there, like there are other Japanese series that I've seen that are wildly different. Like the story is completely different between the manga and the anime and the movie made, like the OVA movie made from the manga. Like it's still an animated movie, but it's like you're like, oh, is this supposed to be like a short version of the anime? And it's like, no, it's a different story,
totally
completely.
different story.
Like
Yeah.
completely, like Escaflowne is like one of my favorites, and all three, the manga, the show, and the movie, are completely different stories. They have the same names, but the even the look, the character designs are completely different
Oh, okay.
between them. It's insane. Like,
Yeah.
but anyways, um, getting back to this one, so the movie itself, Knights of the Zodiac, was influenced by the anime directly and not necessarily the manga. So I will say that there is that. There are a couple of cues, just the look of the armor, and there's even a kind of Easter egg later on in the movie that we'll talk about when we get to it. But I was disappointed in it as an adaptation of the anime, but I'm going to keep my commentary on those differences as more trivia as we go through the plot, just as a fun comparison and not some like sort of criticism on its accuracy to the source material, because I said that's pretty common, and the potholes and criticism will try to be based on the film as it stands by itself, rather than
And I
like,
think
oh, they,
I
they
think
did
that's
it this way in manga, it's bad, but it's not.
yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
different. It's different.
Well, and I think
It's
that's
just
a
a different story.
fair that's a fair thing to do too, because especially because I feel like so many of the adaptations, like there's some adaptations that are clearly geared towards the fans of the animes or the mangas that they're based off of, but
Yeah,
I feel like this is one of those situations where it feels very much to me like watching this movie and not having a huge amount of understanding of the source material. While there is stuff that ties back to the source material, that it feels to me like they made this kind of as a try to like a catch all for like, oh, anyone should be able to watch this and it'll be okay. It's not like you have to, you know,
yeah.
kept up on the anime or the manga. I mean, it doesn't really pay out that way all the way through, but
It doesn't.
but
Yeah,
it feels that I feel like at least this one has the feel of it. It doesn't feel like they are like hiding stuff behind the history of the show, like of the anime and the manga. So all right, well, let's look it on. I'll do a plot summary here. um the movie opens up with two armored figures fighting in the sky, and a voiceover kind of giving us the breakdown of what the core of the story is about, which essentially we learn that the gods are at war with the humans, um, and then somewhere along the lines, Athena has been reborn. Um, these two armored figures are fighting up in the sky. One of them has wings and golden armor and appears to defeat the other one, um, and falls to the ground with this little armored baby papoose. It comes crashing down into the ground, and it kind of like the camera kind of falls into to them to see that the someone in this golden armor is laying there with this baby. And basically this is like this is kind of like done in kind of a flashback kind of format where it's like, oh, it was 18 years ago, uh but that as some result of that fight or something along those lines, the gods have retreated for some reason, not really well explained there, so I don't know why, but they did. And then we cut to two children. One we find out is the lead of the movie, Seiya, uh, and his sister Patricia, who are sparring. And while doing so, Seiya gets heated as Patricia is mocking him about failing to beat her. And he accidentally touches this medallion she's wearing, which for some reason triggers this burst of energy, which we later find out is Cosmo. Um, and for some reason, Patricia understands that this means that they have to hide, and so she takes Seiya and hides him in a closet. And as she's doing that, they're attacked, and this woman named Garage shows up and takes Patricia, not realizing that Seiya's there. Uh, takes Patricia, and then we cut to a flash forward where now Seiya is all grown up, and he's a fighter in some kind of underground fighting ring, which I believe they call an octagon. Even though Dirty might have some negative things to say about that octagon itself, but this fighting ring's run by a guy named Cassios, starts out already giving crap to Seiya about his fighting style, which apparently is just dancing around, is the way Cassios describes it. So Seiya gets into the ring to fight someone, and gets tired of Cassios harassing him from the sidelines, so he kicks Cassios' cigar out of his mouth as part of a move, which upsets Cassios greatly, and then he jumps down into the ring, knocks out the other fighter, and then continues to pummel Seiya. Seiya at least kind of holds his own for a half a beat, and then gets beaten mercilessly until he's almost unconscious. As Cassio is going to drive Seiya into the ground, Seiya unleashes a burst of Cosmo. We don't know it at the time, but we learn eventually it's called Cosmo. That I guess is, I don't understand what the move was supposed to do, but it looked like it was like some kind of burst to protect him and knock out Cassio, but it didn't really knock out Cassio, and it didn't really protect Seiya, because Seiya goes unconscious and Cassio runs around the ring like he won the fight. So after the fight, a guy named Docrates, which I don't think we ever hear his name in the movie. The only place I saw his name was actually in the credits, I think.
They do
Do they
say it.
do they?
They,
There's not a lot of
well,
conversation around this
there's a
guy.
passing mention of his name for sure. I was
Oh,
wondering
okay.
about that too, but I think there was one.
So he is waiting where Seiya is
Because like, who is
recovering.
this guy? And then it's
Yeah.
like, oh, it's him.
Oh, it's
Okay,
Docrates.
okay.
I assume it's
Well, it's
Docrates
not.
based on,
But
because everything's like Greek, right?
Docrates,
Yeah,
Ducrates.
Docrates. So he tells Seiya, "Hey, there's someone that wants to meet you." Seiya's like, "Oh, not interested." And then he changes Seiya's mind by just saying essentially that uh, this person can help you find what you're looking for. Doesn't say anything else. Doesn't confirm that this is about his sister or anything along those lines. But we're kind of given the idea that that Seiya is looking for his sister still. Um, and so he jumps at the chance to meet someone who can help him with that. So Seiya kind of goes out back and meets Almond Keto, who warns him that someone named Garad, who just happens to be his ex-wife, is coming to get him, and that this fighting ring is like Garad's uh, recruitment center, essentially, for her little army. Um, Shortly after that little conversation, some superhuman warriors in armor show up. Um, and so Alman and Seiya leave, as Docrates stays behind to stop them, I guess. Which is really funny because it seems like he's gonna make this stand and they're gonna have this fight, but they like literally knock him out in one move, and then take him away. And so Seiya and Alman are running, and they go out and they meet Mylok, who is another one of Alman Keto's like henchmen. I don't know what's the good version of henchman. Henchman just sounds bad, regardless of whether or not it's good or bad.
His Alfred. It's his Alfred.
His Alfred. It's his Alfred. Yeah. It's his butler. His his butler that can do everything, that was probably SAS trained or something like that. Uh, so uh, so after they have stunned and captured Docrates, and they are still chasing, Mylok is standing there with a big rifle, like an SVD, like taking shots at these guys, and it's not even breaking their armor, but it's pushing them back a few feet. So he buys them some time, I guess, so that they can jump into this armored car and immediately take off, while a large ship, uh, hovering over the ground, like it's like an oversized helicopter with like vertical takeoff and landing engines, um, just hanging there, like has the usual like stop, we want that guy, give him to us, and you'll be left alone. And of course they ignore that and take off, and so this uh a chase ensues with this large hovering ship, where the ship is trying to stop them by not shooting them directly, but just shooting everything around them. Uh, they after a while in this chase, they make it into a tunnel, and they get out of the armored car because the armored car has been kind of disabled, and um, Seiya starts arguing with Allman about this because this is all crazy because he's being shot at. It's kind of a reasonable argument to have there in the moment. But Allman says, "Oh well, we're not done running." And when Seiya goes to argue again, Mylok just like knocks him out with some drug they didn't have before. When it would have made things a little quicker to get him into the car, maybe if they knocked him out before that, right? Like, but they wanted him, I guess, to see that he was being shot at or something. So when Seiya comes to, oh, I lost my place. So yeah, when Seiya comes to, they are on now a plane of some kind. This like advanced like plane. It looks like a kind of like a private jet on the inside, but a little bit bigger. And then uh, Alman Keto explains that they're heading to his mansion, his hideout. Um, and Seiya's obstinate about it, but not a lot he can do because he's stuck on this plane, flying with them. And so once they get there, Alman introduces Seiya to his adopted daughter Sienna, who he explains is also the reincarnation of Athena. um, Keto basically explains to Seiya that, hey, I've been looking for knights to protect her. And as they're like meeting and introduced to each other, they immediately start with the odd couple bullshit of well, I think things are one way, and then the other one's like, oh, well, I think things are the other way, and then we have a disagreement about that. Oh no. And so it gets a little goofy right off the bat. But so they spend some time talking, and eventually, either the next day or another day, they both get up and they're having breakfast. And while they're having breakfast, something happens, and Sienna kind of loses control of her Cosmo and starts to like pulse with energy. And Seiya's like, "What's going on? Oh my god!" And she's just like telling him, "Run away now!" And as this is all happening, Keto comes into the room and basically tells her to calm down, and then she stops losing control of her Cosmo. So all you have to do is tell her to calm down, and then she'll calm down. It'll be okay. That's all you got to do. Um, so Sienna then explains to Seiya that Keto and Garad rescued her as a baby, that Garad had used the golden armor from the knight that was protecting her to develop all this technology. No comment on what happened to the knight. Not exactly sure what happened there. But that his armor apparently unlocked a lot of technology for normal humans. And apparently that's how Garad has been making these soldiers and has all this stuff to track them down and whatnot.
Not a thing in the anime and the manga, by the
way. Yeah. I as a side note, real quick, Garad is like a late addition, right? Like Garad is actually from a more recent anime movie for this, right? I don't think Garad's been in the story the whole time.
I thought Garad was a bastardization of Gerard, as in the Gerard Institute that Keto was supposed to be a part of in the anime, but I could be.
Oh, we'll talk about it in the trivia part. Yep. I got some notes. So we cut to Garad showing up at Cassio's octagon. Big air quotes around that. showing up at Cassio's octagon and berating Cassios for letting Seiya get away. And then they're just gonna kill him or something along those lines, but end up like, I don't know, his will to hurt Seiya is so strong that they kind of just jump him into their little gang of augmented super soldiers. And they bring him back with him to get him augmented without really telling him what the deal is with it. But then we cut back to Seiya and Sienna and Kido talking, and they convince Seiya to go to Marin, who we find out is the Silver Knight, for training in how to be a knight and all the knightly things and the Cosmo and the whatnot. So Mylok takes Seiya to an island with a big cliff that goes up into the clouds and drops him off as far away as possible from that cliff and tells him to walk. So after getting dropped off, he walks, he starts climbing the cliff, complains, does the little thing about complaining about the whole situation while he's doing it to himself, just not, just things that people wouldn't say out loud to themselves, but it's a movie script. So eventually when he gets to the top, he meets Marin, the Silver Knight, and she's all dressed up in her knight armor and has a face mask and everything, so we can't see her, so we don't know. I get this kind of vibe that she was Patricia, but apparently Patricia didn't have any Cosmo, so couldn't be Patricia. So, but basically, she starts giving him crap right away. She starts shitting on his ability and the fact that he's not actually a knight. She's like, he's like, I'm here for training, and she says, well, I only train knights, and then starts walking away from him, and then she just jumps off the cliff, and he's left standing there going like, well, I'm not going down there. I just got up here, and then we cut to, I guess, either he kept walking up or I don't know, jumped down. I don't know what happened in the cut here, but he's on another part of the island where you can see a shattered statue in the distance that's also floating. And Marin shows back up and basically is like, well, why didn't you just give up and go away? And he's like, well, I want to be trained to be a knight. So she's like, okay, well, if you're a knight, then break this rock, and she hands him this fist-sized rock, and he's like, okay, cool, where's my sword to break this rock? And she's like, well, knights don't need swords to break rocks. They could just use their bare hands, and he laughs at that. And Marin's basically like, no, I'm serious. Like, if you use Cosmo, you can just shatter stuff. Hands down, it's the super powerful ability. And so he puts the rock down on this other larger rock, and then he immediately punches it and almost breaks his hand in the process. And then Marin explains to him about the whole, how they use Cosmo to do this, and he goes okay, and he kind of centers himself and lines himself back up, and then he punches it again and almost breaks his hand again. And that leads us into the training montage.
Gotta have a montage.
Gotta have a montage. So after all those miserable failures there, he shifts into this montage mode, and he starts training with Marin. Then we cut back to Sienna, who has a vision of herself becoming Athena and basically destroying Seiya's armor. He's there fighting with her, and she destroys Seiya's armor and then just starts to obliterate the world. Which apparently, freaks her out and gives her some drive to talk to him about it at some point. Then we immediately cut back, and it's we're finishing the training montage, and Seiya has finally gained control of his Cosmo. This is an indeterminate amount of time, by the way. This feels like maybe 15, 20 minutes has passed. But it could have been weeks, I guess. Where, Seiya finally, has some control over his Cosmo, and he uses that to break the rock. And when that happens, he kind of unlocks his armor, and we see this whole scene where his armor appears and then starts, flashing onto him. And as that's happening, he's given a vision. He's had this flashback a couple of times throughout the movie of what happened when his sister was taken. and we slowly get bits and pieces each time we see this flashback. And so he sees this flashback again, and on top of seeing Garad there taking his sister, he also sees that Kido is there. And so that immediately makes him not happy with the situation he's in. And so he's like, oh, I got to go back and confront Kido about this. And Marin is not super happy that he's doing this. So she kind of fights him for a moment to try to keep him there to finish his training, because you have to bond with the armor. But he's like, nope, I'm going back. And so Seiya returns to the mansion.
Very much a Yoda Luke.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Totally vibes of that of the swamp in in Return of the Jedi. Total vibes of Luke leaving the training early. Yeah, exactly. So after he returns to the mansion, he confronts Kido, but Sienna kind of intervenes and takes him away on a stroll away from the mansion. They go and like jump on a bike and leave. Even though, by the way, I forgot to mention, they explained earlier that the mansion is set up to kind of shield Cosmo pulses, so that when Athena or when Sienna loses control of her Cosmo, and she does that pulse of energy, that no one can detect it. But they made it very clear that it's just the mansion. But this is like the second or third time where they just leave the mansion, and it's okay.
Right.
So, so Sienna takes him out and starts explaining, gives the plot dump to to Seiya, and explains that when she was found, when Garad and Kido found her with the Pegasus Knight, it there she let out, she was a child, she was a baby, and she let out a burst of Cosmo, and Garad was holding her at the time. So Garad lost her arms, holding on to the baby Sienna. And for some reason now, that means that now Garad has to drain the Cosmo from children in order to stay alive, or like keep her fake arms. I don't know. They didn't really explain the connection, but we do find out that, oh, okay, Garad's been kidnapping children with Cosmo and absorbing their power for some reason. I don't think they ever really explain that and how that links up to them draining Athena. I don't know. But so Sienna continues to explain that when Patricia was taken, Garad realized that Patricia, after they'd taken her, Garad realized that Patricia herself didn't have any Cosmo, and so they really just let her go. But Patricia was worried because Garad was kind of keeping an eye on her, I guess. So Patricia never went back to Seiya because she was concerned that that would lead Garad to Seiya. They never really explain what Patricia knows or why she's training Seiya, or how they came in to the Pegasus armor. I guess it was it their
Yep.
mothers?
Yeah.
They didn't really explain that part.
Nope.
But,
Yeah, I don't know.
yeah. So eventually, Sienna continues to explain that eventually, as all part of the plot dump here, Kido eventually realized that Garad was doing a lot of this for power and not for, like, Kido believed that they were doing this for the good of humanity, and that this was like an altruistic thing that they were doing, and that the bad stuff that they were doing was because of good reasons. But then he comes to realize that, oh no, Garad just wants this power, and during all of this, Garad also, for some reason, on her own, comes to the belief that Athena coming back is going to destroy the world. They don't really give a reason for that either, other than the fact that gods and humans were kind of fighting. But then for some reason, the Zodiac Knights were protecting the Athena baby. I don't. It's a little bit of a mess, and they don't help with this plot dump. So
Yeah.
Garad eventually, believing that Athena is going to destroy the world, Garad eventually tries to kill Sienna, and that causes Kido to take Sienna and run away, essentially. And they've been living as father with adopted daughter ever since. in a big mansion that's hidden away from everyone. That Garad has no idea where it's at. Uh, while all this is going on, uh, somehow, and I don't remember exactly how this worked, but somehow Garad, who has never been able to find this mansion before, finds the mansion. I don't remember. Like, I just watched this movie again. I don't remember how they actually found the mansion. But Garad arrives with modified Cassios and her other soldiers and Nero, who's also been helping her here.
There was
Um,
something like the shields were destroyed and something or other, wasn't it? Or
they I don't remember because it's like it seemed like they were already there because they were already there while Sienna and Saya were out talking. Like they showed up before they got back to the mansion. So I don't know. They didn't really. I don't remember them explaining exactly how Garad found the mansion after not being able to find it for so long. Which we'll talk about this later. But like you can't just track uh uh the plane that they fly in and out with. I don't know. Um. So Garad uh shows up with these fighters. They all like start to take over the mansion. Keto, realizing that this is the case, activates a bomb that he has hidden in this statue of Athena, and then takes the remote control for it, anticipating a showdown. I guess I don't know. Saya and Sienna are on their way back and realize that the mansion's under attack, and so Saya fights off a lot of Garad's fighters, and it actually kind of defeats Cassios here. But uh, Nero is there, and they have a whole bunch more fighters, and so Keto is trying to take out Garad before anything bad can happen. And Keto sacrifices himself by blowing up the mansion, which forces Garad to leave, though Garad has already captured Sienna because, I'm sorry, during the Cassios fight, I guess, oh no, he didn't beat Cassios. That's what it was. I'm sorry. During the Cassios fight, Cassios actually knocks him unconscious, and then they take Sienna, and then Keto blows up the mansion. Um, After a little bit, Mylok shows up and wakes up Saya, and explains what happened, and then they decide they're going to go assault Garad's secret base to go get Sienna back. Um, uh,
it was Docrates that
Oh, it was
gave them.
Docrates. That's
Yeah.
what it was. Okay. Oh yeah, and I totally forgot about that. So yeah, they had Docrates. They captured him. That in the very beginning. No one talks about it after that, by the way, until we see that he's captured, and like Keto doesn't seem to be bothered by him having been captured. Mylok doesn't seem to be bothered by him having been captured. Like it's really weird the way they handle all that. Uh, and then Nero interrogates Docrates and uses his greatest fear against him, which is apparently some kind of Cthulhu-esque monster thing, to get him to reveal where the mansion is. That's what it was. Thank you. Yes, I totally forgot about that when writing up this. this. Um.
It's all good.
So yeah. So Mylok and Saya are get to Garad's secret base, but the anti-aircraft fire is crazy. So Saya has to jump out of the plane, and then Mylok is going to land the plane and meet him back at the base once he's landed that safely and makes his way over to the base. So Saya jumps out of the plane. He figures out, I guess, how to activate his Pegasus armor, and then he just handily defeats all of Garad's guards that come up to him, including Cassios at this time. So this is like fight number 3 for Cassios and Saya, and finally Saya wins the fight. While this is going on, oh man, I skipped over this part too. While this is going on, Garad is talking to Sienna and admits that she has kind of given up on fixing herself and is just kind of doing this for power. And then starts to deplete her Cosmo. But while she's depleting Sienna's Cosmo, Sienna is crying out in pain. It's obviously not a fun experience for anyone. And so Garad, this being her kind of adoptive daughter practically, is starts to feel the pangs of guilt about it, and so tries to stop the process of draining Sienna's Cosmo. Um, but Nero, who is her like second in command guy, um, he's sold on the mission. He believes that the gods are gonna destroy the world, and so he does not want to let. He wants to finish the process and kill Athena here. And so he starts to fight with Grodd and changes into his knight form, which is he's apparently the Phoenix Knight, which we just find out in that scene. Which they had mentioned the Phoenix Knight previously a couple of times, but no, and that he's a very powerful knight, but no one really explained who
And,
he was just yet.
and anyone who had seen the the anime and was familiar with the Phoenix Knight's powers saw that when he was torturing Socrates, like, oh, this is clearly going to be the Phoenix Knight. So if you're familiar with the anime, that's one of the like early like teasers that they're like giving. Aha, this is who you think it is, and then now we're actually like getting that, like
Now we get the payoff.
the payoff for that. Yeah,
So
thank you. Payoff
so
was
yeah,
the word I was
so,
like.
oh yeah, yeah. So Seiya, while they're fighting, while Garad and Nero are fighting the Phoenix Knight, uh, Seiya shows up in his Pegasus armor and starts to fight Nero. Uh, while Seiya is fighting Nero, Garad goes and pulls a couple of patch cables, which is the way that you shut down the Cosmo draining apparatus. Apparently, just so it I just want to point out the Cosmo draining apparatus is not it is not well protected from network segmentation, because as soon as you know unplug some patch cables, it just stops the Cosmo draining. Just
Yeah,
stops outright. You need that. You need an internet. You need an active internet connection to continue draining the Cosmo.
it's a live service,
It's a live
right?
service. So,
The
so,
live service.
so Seiya, uh, when this happens, Seiya finally defeats Nero. Well, it doesn't defeats Nero. Pushes like basically like gets him to leave, run off. Um, then Seiya helps. Oh, sorry. So Garad pulls the patch cable to stop the draining process. Sienna goes almost full Athena mode at this point and pops up, and it looks just like her vision from earlier, where she's like emitting all this purple power and blowing off armor off of people and stuff. And so that's when Nero's kind of defeated, and then Seiya switches into like trying to help her calm down. And I think he remembers the key to getting her to calm down is just to tell her that she needs to calm down, and that always works when people are in this like this crazy manic Cosmo episode.
Sun's getting awfully low.
Right. So Seiya uh it basically snaps her out of it, but she falls unconscious, and he goes to her and picks her up and kind of helps wake her up. When she wakes up, she's also, for some reason, she's got purple hair now. And then she kind of has a little reconciliation moment with Garad, who kind of like has a moment and then disappears. Um, then Sienna and Seiya, Mylok shows up, and Sienna and Seiya leave with Mylok, and as they take off, you can see Nero watching them from the distance. So he's still alive, just just in case you didn't notice that he didn't actually die during that fight. Um, Sienna then reveals to Seiya that, hey, the gods are returning. With this, we have no idea where this came from exactly, so I assume it came from some vision while she was having the Cosmo drained or turned into Athena or whatever. But Sienna says that, hey, the gods are returning, and the Knights of the Zodiac need to stop them. So that we need
Said
to
the
find
thing.
more
Said the
knights.
thing.
Is that the thing?
She said the thing.
She
The name
said
of the
the
thing.
thing. Oh yeah, yeah. I love when they say the name of the movie in the movie. So Sienna also reveals, though, hey, we should go find, or it doesn't reveal. She also says, hey, we should go find Patricia. And then the credits roll, and that's the movie right there. So I want to start by saying that I had very low expectations of this movie, especially when we talked about it, and you were like, hey, you did audibly groan when we when I brought up Knights of the Zodiac as one of the ones that we could do. So my expectations were very low, uh, and they were met most of the time. Unfortunately for the movie, but I do want to say that there were a couple of things that like there's a couple of people in this movie like regardless of how poorly the characters are written. Garad, who was played by I don't know how to say her last name.
Jensen, yeah,
Jansen. Okay,
Jansen,
Famke
Jansen.
Janssen. Uh, and Alman Keto, who's played by Sean Bean. So of course you knew he was going to die before you even like got to the part where he dies. Um, they are reasonably good at their characters. The writing doesn't give them a lot to do, but they both are the least bad parts of this movie. I also think Seiya, the guy who played Seiya, is I forget his name, but he's the guy that played Zoro in the live action One Piece. I think for the most part he was good too. Like again, the writing I think did him a major disservice, but the one thing that was kind of cool about the movie was they did the action pretty good. The fight scenes were not bad. Like it was enjoyable. I would have, if you like decent action, I would recommend watching it just for the fighting. You know, it wasn't that surprised me as one of the good
For
things
sure.
before we get deep into all the problems with this movie.
Yeah, I mean, I will even point that out when we get to the. But yeah, I was definitely like, this is kind of what we came here for, right?
Right.
Like, uh,
We
martial
wanted bad
arts,
movies to shit on.
batting with magic kind of stuff. Yeah. So, shall we get started tearing this thing apart?
Yeah.
Oh man. In the beginning, like Joe mentioned, the octagon. Um, Cassius called it an octagon, and yes, it technically has 8 sides, and that means it's technically an octagon. But what the fuck kind of octagon is that? Like, it's mostly a square with the tiny slices of the corners taken out, and so it's definitely not like, the UFC octagon. And I think that might be the point, but it's still like, really, like, the you can't trademark an octagon shape. I don't know why that would really get them in much trouble, but it just, come on. And then like later on in this fight scene, we get this whole like, no dancing. It's like,
Oh yeah,
really? You haven't
Cassius
seen
calls him out.
martial arts? Yeah. This is obviously it's martial arts in what is clearly a mixed martial arts cage match.
So, and I want to bring up this. There's a couple of my things missing from here. I must have not written them down or something. But I just want to point out too that uh, this in this scene in particular. So it's like they play this up like this is a big underground fighting ring. Every shot in this scene where you see like the people watching the fight, every shot looks like they had potentially tens of people, but they put them in each shot to make the crowd look as big as possible. So like some of the shots are very narrowly defined, but you see a long distance past the ring, and it looks like they just stacked the group of people up so that it looked like a big crowd. But then they cut to another angle, and all the people are lined up against the fence, but there's no one behind them. And so it looks like there's like maybe like 15 or 20 people watching this, but then they keep moving positions from shot to shot.
Yeah, it definitely it's made to look like it's more populated than it actually is.
Yeah.
But yeah. So we get through that whole scene with the fight, and you get the first triggering of the Cosmo, and then that it's like, oh, we found him, and so suddenly Gerard knows where they're at and can track them now, and it's like,
To be fair, they foreshadowed that with how they found
I found them to
Patricia.
begin with, yeah,
Yeah.
but
But it seems like it's like way more instantaneous now. Like, there's no.
Well, my problem with this is the whole like, okay, so that's how they find them when they as kids. That's how they find him now. How has he not experienced any tough fights between then and now,
Well, you
where
see,
he
he's
has
got to
not
experience
had
the tough
triggered
fight,
that?
and he's got to touch the medallion, which he doesn't touch in this scene. By the way, that's the other weird thing about this. So yeah, there's a bunch of rules to the way the Cosmo power works that they never explain and that they use very loosely.
Well, and then so you can track Cosmo being used, and if it's used in like these, if like as accidentally as that was in that match, why even bother with this whole octagon recruitment scheme to begin with? Like, why not just track them all when they accidentally use that out in the real world? It seems a lot easier than setting up some kind of like
I
the tournament for that.
I took the recruitment thing a slightly different way in my head, in that it's like, oh well, this is where Garad gets her like chaff, her soldiers.
Okay,
Like
sure.
that maybe
I
they told them to
definitely.
be on the lookout for people with this power, with some kind of special power, but they also, it's like this is how she gets her fighters to for her little army. Um they didn't explicitly say that, so it was I totally I'm with you in the fact that it's very confusing, because if they didn't mean that, if they really meant it was just this was how she found people with Cosmo, it did feel really weird, especially because Cassius seems to like Cassius talks to her and is like basically like, "Hey, we found that one thing you've been looking for." At like he doesn't do this all the time, or he has no idea what Cosmo is, and so it's like he hasn't run into people like this before. Is what the feeling was.
Yeah, we after that whole scene with the chase and they escape, they get to the island, and one of the more nitpicky things I have is when Sean Bean is introducing himself, and he calls himself Almond Kiddo at one point, and I cringed a bit because it is supposed
When
to be keto, because it is Japanese, and he's supposed to be Japanese, and I'm not sure if they're having him say kiddo because he's not Japanese, and they needed to like
oh no,
make it
I
fit
fully think that was
like
just
watch the
Sean.
character.
I think that was just Sean Bean's accent taking over, because he's got kind of his normal accent in this movie. He's not playing like an American, you know.
It's
Uh,
not that hard to say keto,
I
even with an accent.
I
And
yeah, that's why I feel like it's just a no one really explained it to him, and he's he just said it that way, and then
yeah,
they were too lazy to take another take, or no one noticed in the moment.
it just
It was dumb,
er, it irked me.
right?
Nitpicky thing, but yeah.
Well, and
Um,
so as they're leaving this place too, like, okay, so the chase scene that happens, the thing that really kills me about this chase scene is that they are clearly directly attacking them. They clearly are not worried about hurting anyone. Uh but at the same time, when they get to the ship versus the armored car fight, like they're following this armored car around and they are literally shooting circles around it with the guns, and then literally
yeah,
shooting the buildings above it to drop parts of the building down on the car with the guns for some reason. Like that's going to be less deadly. Like a large chunk of falling building is going to be less deadly than a bullet. So, let's be careful and gentle with these guys, and let's just throw parts of buildings at them.
yeah. That it was over the top, but it's over the top action movie kind of fodder.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Typical junk. Um, but yeah, and I think you mentioned it before in the synopsis that you were given. The Seiya was being like very flippant to people that are like they just saved him. They have a lot of money. They tell him that he's destined to be this guardian of Athena, and it's like he just keeps mouthing off, and then he just keeps on doing it. Especially um, when he's introduced to her, and then he's just a complete ass about it. And you mentioned
Right?
like the whole like odd couple thing too, and them
Yeah.
going back and forth, and it's like why would he
Eh,
okay, you could say like maybe he's just a skeptic, right?
yeah.
And he just continues to be that way until proven without doubt. But he has experienced magic shit as a kid and in that fight, and you know these all these guys have lots of money that they saw you exhibit that magic power and
Well, and
believe you have it, but
he's
they're the crazy ones for some reason.
yeah.
Like,
Well, and he saw his sister get taken. Like, so he has clearly experienced someone forcibly trying to take people before. He has some understanding that there's weird stuff going on. Like, and I understand not like going in whole hog right off the bat, but yeah, the way he responds to the whole situation is like a weird. It's like someone like a young or a preteen or teenager going through puberty. The way that there is very little rhyme or reason to why they're angry at the world, you know, in the immediate sense of things, but they also flip on a dime and then everything's okay for some reason after that. And it's
yeah,
like, oh, after you drug me and then fly me to your mansion and then introduce me to your daughter who is very angry with me right off the bat for no reason. Also, uh, that's the other thing I didn't get was why is Sienna immediately have a combative relationship with this person if she understands everything around this and she knows that his sister she knew everything about his sister. She knows all the stuff about how Garad and Keto's operation worked. And yet in the beginning, the way she treats Seiya is like he's just an asshole who's not going to help them with anything.
yeah, yeah. And by the way, none of that is in the show. Like,
Yeah.
they don't have any of the shields that block detection or anything. It's kind of silly. They don't have any of the magic tracking like that. Yeah, hell, even the beginning of the movie is completely different from the show. Like in the anime, they start off with Seiya. Well, there it actually is in a tournament. Don't get me wrong. They start
Okay.
off in a tournament called the Galaxian Wars, and it's about a bunch of these bronze knights who already have their bronze armor combating with each other to earn a gold armor.
I think
And then they cut to Seiya, who is still fighting in Greece, and he's competing with Cassius. Cassius isn't a bad guy. Him and Seiya are opponents for sure, and he's an antagonist here, but they're competing to be bronze knights together. Like,
oh, okay.
and at the end of the day, it's like a sense of camaraderie, and the whole like Docrates guy, he's Cassius's brother. Like, it's just there's so many changes from the anime that it's
Well, and I think I
yeah.
feel like a lot of that probably centered around the fact that they didn't want to do a lot of screen time in armor. I feel like a lot of corners were cut to try to save money on this, probably because they spent so much money on the casting. Like I don't know how much they spent on the casting, but I feel like the casting is probably the most priciest looking thing about this movie. And like so I feel like those kinds of changes they made to the story was to make it so that they could spend less time in armor and they could spend less time having to do special effects on screen.
Well, there
Uh
was just a lot to cut out to begin with. And there's
yeah.
a number of things that you could have cut to, if you're going to try and stay faithful to the story. But obviously they weren't. They're making a lot of changes for the sake of, making something that was, like you mentioned earlier, that would have been digestible for what they figured. Oh yeah, this will have a wider appeal for more people and be
I
more
feel like if they
palatable
went the
for a
full
wider
fantasy
audience.
route and they just, everything was like you're describing there from the anime,
Well, it's hard to explain all that stuff too without a
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
exposition, so you can't really shove that into the movie. So
And I agree with you on that, but what I think is in my head I'm thinking like, well, I mean this movie was already like 80% exposition anyway. Like what
well, and a
if
lot
you're
of
gonna
stuff is
have to?
hand waved away too. Like
Yeah,
they exposition a lot, and then they hand wave a lot away too, and it's like, well, why? But that seems like it would be more worthy of exposition than a lot of this other crap that we've gotten that wasn't in the any of the source
I I feel
materials.
like this movie's probably ran into the same problem that there's a couple of other movies that I've seen recently that have had this problem where they are clearly written like the movie itself was probably written as a standalone thing, like it wasn't a Knights of the Zodiac thing. and they were just like, hey, let's
Oh,
attach, like, we have this
yeah.
idea of
Let's
how we
use
want to
the
do it.
IP. Yeah,
Let's attach this IP to it, and then it becomes a more they do it
yeah.
to get more people, from the, oh, there's fans of this original IP. Let's bring those people in by kind of giving this a thin veneer of, hey, this is a Knights of the Zodiac movie. So this movie kind of feels that way to me, because I'm trying to think of what there was recently there was one that was kind of big, that was like, I think it was a sci-fi movie that was like outright had nothing to do with the original material.
But just pointing out like what they are, and
Yeah.
so that was kind of
Oh,
one. But yeah,
hold
the
up
whole
just a sec.
shields thing, detection.
Okay. Okay, there we go. Yeah, no, I did lose my connection there for a moment because my stream kicked out, but I
Okay.
should be okay now. Yeah, we're reconnected. Okay, there we go. Apologies.
All good. All good.
Technical issues. All right, we can move on.
Yeah, let's move on. So I think the next scenes were oh, there was something where Cassius was offered to kill Seiya for free. And I'm like, really?
Yeah. The
Dude,
whole the
no,
whole driving force
everything has a
behind his
price.
character.
Never give away goods or services for free. Don't cheat yourself, man.
Well,
Don't cheat
and
yourself.
it cracks me up that, like, they were like, he was running this fighting ring. He clearly had a halfway decent relationship with Seiya. Seiya kicks a cigar out of his mouth, and it's over. Cassius just wants to kill him now, and that's all Cassius wants. The whole movie
No,
is just to
no
kill Seiya.
dancing.
No
He danced.
dancing.
Gotta die. Gotta
He
die now.
danced and kicked the cigar out of my mouth. Now he's gonna die, and that's it. I said he's gonna die. Now he has to die, and so I'm gonna spend the entire rest of the movie just reminding everyone that all I care about is killing Seiya.
Yeah.
So I think the Cosmo transfusion is another one that was kind of goofy, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, as if it's a blood transfusion, and oddly enough, it's not the first time that Femke Jensen's played a vampire with a lot of money and cutting edge tech at her disposal.
I think that's
It's
a
in Hemlock
recurring
Grove. That's
theme in this movie is actors playing their characters. Just
yeah.
characters that they always play. So we got Sean Bean. I feel like oh god, I don't remember. McIntyre. I don't know if that's how you say his name. McIntyre. The Seiya in this. Like, I've seen him in a couple of little things so far, including One Piece, and it's like he's this too cool for school chosen one is his like his character. And then we got Sean Bean playing a guy who dies, So you get a lot of
Always.
that, right?
But yeah.
Um oh, so Marin, uh it kind of cracks me up that they don't explain this, because I'm pretty sure this is actually a thing, right? But there's like different levels of the armor, right? Where they have like a
Mm,
full blown, like, full armor look, and then they have like partially armored looks and whatnot. And
no.
like, oh, okay, it's not okay. Then I am horrifically wrong with that. But
Nope. This is a thing for the movie.
oh, okay,
There's a difference with the armor there. So Marin, first off, I want to say that the Marin cosplay is excellent and superb. That's like 9 out of 10, and about as accurate to the manga and anime as the MCU is to the comics,
okay,
as far as like the look of the armor and stuff. Um, and that's kind of a reoccurring theme with a lot of the armor design in here. Is it actually looks very close to how the anime portrayed it, which is actually a lot more embellished than the manga. I will say that. But
okay,
for Marin, yeah, I mean it looks great and spot on. That's just her armor
okay,
in the series. Yeah, that's just what she's normally wearing. It's not like she's one of the saints, or because
okay.
okay, in the original Japanese title of it, it's Saint Seiya, not Knights of the Zodiac. They just changed it from Saints to Knights for whatever reason in the English world when they adapted it, when they dubbed it a long time ago for English. But it was
But it was Saint
Saint
Seiya.
Seiya.
Uh,
Yeah, Saint Seiya is the actual Japanese title of the series,
and the
of
armor's
the whole
called like
franchise.
cloth in the series, right?
It's called Cloth, but
Yeah.
it's weird because it's more, and I think you mentioned this in some of the facts area, the trivia, like it's supposed to be kind of leathery looking and but still metal looking. Like it's a weird thing because they call it the bronze cloth and then the silver cloth and then the gold cloth. But in my brain, I just always substitute cloth for armor. So like the bronze armor, the silver armor, the gold armor, etc. And I think that's kind of what the creator of the series was trying to do when they were naming it, but they just called it cloth. I don't know, but it in the sense that it's cloth though, it does have kind of a leathery look to it in both like how it's portrayed in the movie, and I think in my head that's how I was justifying it as both an armor being called a cloth. I was like, well, maybe it's like leathers and stuff like that. Um,
Well, I always thought
but it's
I always
very
thought the
clearly
what
like gold looking in the
yeah.
show.
Well, and
Like
what
the
little I
gold
knew
armor
of
looks like
the
gold.
what little I knew of the anime, from my buddy Kit, uh, the what little I'd seen of the anime, I always felt like the cloth was kind of like because like them play this the name Saint too, like had
Yeah,
very like it felt like there were some religious themes, and cloth was like kind of just like uh, a a the type of armor it was. Not that it was cloth itself, but that it was like this
cloth
kind of
armor.
armor is just known as cloth. Well, as like kind of like it's a like a relic of some kind that
Okay.
transforms into what it needs to be.
Sort of, yeah, yeah. I will say, like the look of the cloth, in both, I mean, in for the silver and the gold,
Hmm.
looks like it's silver and gold metal armor, like what you'd think of as armor, and it's really shiny and everything, and you're like, oh, that looks cool. But the bronze versions of them have colors to them, and
Okay.
are very colorful, and that's something in the anime. I'm not sure how it was portrayed in the manga. I think even on the cover of the manga that was colorized that I saw, I want to say there was actually very little color to it, but in the anime they embellished a lot of the designs and added a lot more color to the Bronze Knights because most of the time they were in their bronze armor, and then again the whole premise of the first like arc was like Seiya was fighting in Greece against Cassius to earn the right to wear the bronze armor, then had to go back to this competition where him and his buddies are trying to fight for the gold armor, and one of them is supposed to compete against these other knights about the gold armor and trying to get that gold armor because it's so rare and so much more powerful than what they've got. But they also kind of have to be worthy of it too, which is kind of something they touch on in here with the whole like um, the whole training scene with Marin and Marin trying to go over him.
Yeah.
And Marin actually does train Seiya in the series, and you see that in the series, I think in like flashbacks and stuff. And there's a little bit, and they do it kind of in the movie here too, a little bit, but not completely as the not as much as they do in the anime, where they kind of tease that Marin is actually his sister, but she isn't. Like
That's
spoiler, like she actually isn't.
I had a feeling too, especially because they like I don't know, either they were being really insistent to try to cover it up, or it was just oh his sister doesn't have any Cosmo, so
Yeah,
this
that was just
couldn't
a
be his
theme.
sister, but they did kind of because she's wearing a mask, so you can't see her, and they describe Marin the Silver Knight without giving away her sex until he shows up and she's there, and you realize oh it's a woman, and she's about the right age, like for being just slightly older than Seiya, like a couple of years older than Seiya. I mean, you can't tell because the mask is there, so she could be a lot older, she could be a lot younger, but the way she sounded,
Yeah,
the way she looked like she was in his age range, you know?
exactly. And they really heavily hint at that a lot and tease at it a lot in the anime. Like blatantly, they just outright like they want you to feel that when Seiya sees Marin, he's thinking like is this my sister kind of thing,
Oh,
and
okay.
drawing like, oh, I recognize a bit of my sister in her kind of thing, and that kind of stuff. And so that's definitely something in the anime that I think they were trying to tease out a little bit here. So I'm glad that you caught on that a little bit, but it's definitely a thing in the anime that eventually does not pay out because at the end of the day, like, nope, different characters. You're like, what? And there's other actually knights. There's not just Marin. There's
Yeah.
uh what I
Well,
can't remember her name right now.
we get to
But
see,
she's in there.
obviously in the movie they show off Phoenix Knight and obviously here the Silver Knight, and there's kind of a general sense that hey, oh, there's a much more of these people, but they don't really like show us anyone else or explain anything else about that. As far as like other differences between the movie and the source material, what's the deal with the fighters? Are those are Garad's fighters cyborgs in the source
No,
material too? No? Okay.
nope.
So
And I mentioned it before that Garad is the name of the institute that Keto founded and was running, and is not a character. And apparently, I looked it up real quick when you mentioned like, yeah, in the new Netflix
like
version
from like
of
2019
like,
or something like that, right?
yeah, I guess they introduced this character in that sense, and
It's
it's a
not.
gender swap though, and
Oh,
it's
okay, yeah.
like, yeah, so it's a dude named Garad, and it's apparently the foundation's named after him, but that's something that was added to that Netflix show and not from the original.
Yeah, it's not from.
Um,
It's like very recent. Like I mean,
yeah,
in the sense of media and how long uh this IP's been around in general. That's like it's super recent that my was my understanding.
yeah, and so that said, the fighters that you see, the Black Knights and stuff, there are Black Knights in the anime, but they're not cyborgs in any way, and they don't work for Garad. They don't. Um, in fact, they work for the Phoenix Knight,
Oh, okay.
and because in the show, like he underwent some trauma. He was actually a brother to one of the other Bronze Knights that we don't see in this movie. And his name is different too. His name is Iki in the show, and um, and so the Bronze Knight, or the Phoenix Knight, kidnaps or not. He steals the gold armor from the competition before anyone can finish the competition. Like him and a bunch of Black Knights crash the party, and they steal the gold armor and run off with it before anyone can win. And so that starts this whole other arc on this island. It's like Death Head Island or Death Maiden Island or something like that. Death Skull Island, something, I don't know. But they take their armor back there, and so the next arc is basically like the Bronze Knights trying to fight all these Black Knights, and it's like it seemed like the Black Knights are just some kind of like a derivative perversion of the armors, I don't remember exactly what made them the
Like
Black
what the
Knights.
core of that actually was, yeah.
Yeah, and because I know the Phoenix Knight was that, but he wasn't wearing really any black armor. He's actually wearing normal bronze armor, and he's just an asshole and uses his fear power to get his way. But eventually has a change of heart and kind of sides with them, and whatever made him evil like got knocked loose, and so he kind of redeems himself in the show. Um, but he does have that power of fear, and so that was cool that they did kind of tease you with that in the movie a little bit early on, going, haha, this guy's using fear power. If you've seen the show, you know where this is going, kind of thing.
That's when he's torturing Docrates, right, to get the information about the mansion. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what
Dr. Keith actually is a guy who ends up stealing armor as well,
oh yeah.
uh, and is a somewhat bad guy, even though he's like the
Which
brother of Cassius or something. But he did it for like other reasons. He didn't do it because he was trying to be an evil bad guy. He was just doing it for some other reason. I can't remember what it was, but it's
so
part of one of the other story arcs in the anime.
so
It's weird that they changed him here as like one of the servants of Kido, one of his butlers,
Yeah, I feel like there was
his
a
fighter
grab
butlers.
bag of like it seems like there's a grab bag of like, oh well, here's concepts from from
Yeah,
the
they
thing.
took a lot of names from
Let's
the
start just
series and just threw
applying
them
it
in
to
here and
random
sprinkled it.
people. And
Yeah,
because like I said, this whole thing with Doherty's like I legitimately like I've watched this movie twice and once last night now, and I honestly do not remember them saying his name ever in the show or in the movie. So so it feels like to me it feels this is another situation where it's like, oh well, he's we'll put another fighter name on him and he'll be Docrates
if
and
I recall correctly, I think it's when they get back to his mansion in the first place, like when Mylok and Kido, kidnap him and take
oh
him to
does
the mansion,
he
and she asks, like Sienna asks, like, where's Docrates, and he's like, gone or something.
which
Like I
which
forget.
cracks me up because they also like other than that then okay so that might have been there I that I definitely could have just missed that but the like aside from that there is no one thinks about him no one's like hey we should go try to rescue him or hey maybe we should
Yeah,
see if
right.
he got captured by Garad. Everyone's just like oh we're okay we're just gonna
He's a lost cause.
he's probably
He's
dead
yeah,
we're cool.
yeah.
So like kind of tying into the depictions of stuff from the anime or manga in this movie. So what like the fighting we talked about the fighting a little bit the fights that happen like before this like the midpoint are mostly like regular fist fights with like some slow-mo thrown in and people some people are so like Seiya is like seems to move with superhuman speed for the most part. Cassius seems to have superhuman speed and power, um but they seem kind of regular. But then once we get to the training montage part where Marin trains Seiya, like we start to see like them actually use like abilities like powers. And how
Yeah,
would you
special
like does
attacks
that
and
like
stuff.
kind of like how does that stuff line up with what you know of from the anime?
That's actually it's pretty spot on to the anime. Like the whole meteor punch that he has. That's like his signature move in the anime. So it's really cool
Oh,
that they're
okay.
bringing that in and kind of going, okay, for once, like, yeah, we're gonna make a nod to the source material and be accurate to it. And so yeah, it's kind of interesting. And Marin in the anime is the one that teaches him the meteor punch or meteor fist, whatever it's called. So
Teaches him to fist meteors.
yeah. But it's yeah. Um, one thing though is like it's definitely like a training thing. It's not like you just magically have that ability at birth or anything.
Okay.
And in fact, like the whole needing like the armor being his right and his only, and how it's tied to him, and how a lot of it like changes. Like you mentioned, or you asked earlier, like how does that whole thing work with the armor levels like changing in power, where you've got his training armor and then you've got his full-fledged armor. And in this whole like the training montage scene, when you see him finally earn that armor and you're like, all right, we're gonna see the Pegasus armor, and then it's just
It's
like
like nope. Here's
yeah, it's like very little like actually on him. It changes his appearance for sure, and he's
oh
wearing
yeah.
new clothes thing. And it's funny because that suit that he's wearing, that clothes,
Uh-huh.
when you get the first armor reveal, that's actually what his training clothes look like in the anime before he gets the armor.
Before he
Before he
even gets the armor. Okay.
so it's kind of funny that like now that's what the armor looks like now. And it was I remember watching it, I was like, what? But what is really cool is like with that whole sequence where the pendant uh, flies off and turns into a box. That's
Oh yeah.
actually what the cloth containers look like in the anime.
Oh okay.
It's a
I
really
yeah, because
weird
I
thing.
in my head I was like, that is like it's like the
Well, in the
square
anime,
box just
they're
pops up and it's like, oh, now
it's
the armor
awkward
is flying
too.
onto him.
It's awkward too because it's
Okay.
like large, it's
Because it's like a
unwieldy, and in
chest they
the
have to like
anime,
carry around or something
yeah,
like that.
in
Yeah.
the anime, like they're lugging that thing around on their backs like backpacks, and it's really odd looking because like you just see this person with this metal looking box that's like twice the size of their torso, right? And it's like or be bigger, right?
Yeah.
It's absurdly large when they're like hauling it on them, and it's literally just a cube. It's a cube, and they're hauling that
That's
around like a backpack, and it's just goofy.
so it's not too far off from what the movie had as far as like I mean he obviously isn't carrying it around on his back and it magically
Well,
appears
that's
for
what
him,
I thought that was
but
great change for the
okay.
movie was like, okay, let's make it a magical item because it is a magical item,
Yeah.
and let's further lean into the fantasy with it and say like, okay, instead of
They're like
him
instead
having
of
to lug around this, he's just got it on the pendant.
no, yeah,
Like,
it's instead of lugging around the armor in a practical box that actually holds the armor, we're gonna have them Power Ranger it and hold their belt up
yeah.
and transform into the armor.
And for a fantasy kind of type of show, I that would have worked fine for me. And that's actually like another show, Ronin Warriors. That's how it works with Ronin Warriors. You know, that's how it works with Sailor Moon. Like they just you do the whole magical
I mean,
transformation
it's
thing.
a.
Voila, there you go. You're in your
I
armor.
feel like that's a classic anime trope for sure. Like,
Yeah, and it's weird that the anime itself leaned away from that and was like, no, it's stored in a box, and they've got to haul that box around everywhere.
well, to
And
be
it's
fair,
like, okay,
so
that's more realistic, but it's magic armor. Why can't it just be
like
like
the
all the other magic armor animes out there? Just like,
well,
okay,
and
yeah,
that was actually something I was going to bring up too, because this is one thing I forgot to get for the trivia, but like the manga is like old, isn't it? Like,
yeah.
isn't this like this is the original stuff is all very old, like
Yep.
70s or something like that, right? Like back in the classic, like we're talking like what's it called? What's that other anime you love that was made way
It was
back when?
1985, by the way.
85. Okay, so not as old as I thought it was, but still in that early state. You know, like what's it called? Uh, what's the giant robot one?
Ultron?
Well, but Ultron was
Gundam?
like earlier than that. No, no,
Or like
no,
Gundam?
no, no. Oh my god, brain not work good.
Macross?
Macross. Yeah. Macross.
Slash Robotech?
Robotech. Yes, thank you. Robotech was the word I was trying to come up with. But Macross,
Okay.
yes. Is, like cuz like that's another old anime like in that same kind of classic era. And so like maybe part of it is that this whole thing like was spawned prior to the trope becoming a huge thing, right? Cuz I feel like that's a really common trope with a lot of the late 80s early 90s anime, right? That the
With the
magical
magic
armor.
armor and how it
Yeah.
works. Yeah, that could be it for sure. I'd have to look to see if the magical armor trope predates a lot of that stuff. There's a lot of old manga that's just and anime that's surprising. Like, oh wow, this was a thing. Okay, kind of, especially when you look at like Voltron, you're like, oh yeah, Voltron. That's totally like where the whole robots that come together form a thing started. No, it's not by any stretch of the means. There have been so many similar series where the assembling giant robot thing was a trope, and it was just really overplayed a lot. And there's so many of them. The list is insane. I'd love to watch them all,
The
but
we'll have to do a series on large multi-part robot fighting animes.
well, then like Power Rangers did it too, so
Yeah,
that
yeah.
was really cool.
So that was the our early live action transition,
Yeah.
getting all the Power Ranger type shows.
Yeah.
Um, at some point during this, uh, Sienna, I think, is the one that's talking to Seiya and says something along the lines of like, "Your sister sacrificed herself because she believed in who you really are." And that to me, that triggered my brain was like, what does that mean? What does that mean? In no scene do they show them as children and the sister with all the exposition they've given about everything else. The sister never once says anything about who they are or why they're off on their own or why he can't touch the pendant or why they have the pendant. Like, so I like this is one thing is a part where the movie really lost me in that it seems like it feels like they reference a lot of stuff, and I understand, I get that's, some of it being, oh, these are just references back to the anime or the manga to kind of tie in that to get the fans of those to kind of like have a little like, oh, this is a little information I have in the back. But like this, I feel like this goes nowhere. There's like, I mean, obviously they're kind of setting themselves up to do another movie, but like they say a lot of stuff about this, about him being destined to be the Pegasus Knight and all this stuff. There is literally no mention anywhere of why any of this happened the way it happened. Like they 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 talk about it like it's this big serious central plot point, but they never actually like reveal any of that information. So they're probably saving it for the third or fourth movie, you know?
You're right. That we'll never get because this is so terrible.
Right. So, and this is all that's all when Say and Sienna are talking to each other. So like Sienna also in that same kind of scene, also like this is another thing that kind of triggered me about that was like, oh, we just met and you're my protector forever now. We've kind of already gone through that part. Uh, but if things go terrible, I need you to kill me, and he just kind of agrees to it. Like, yeah, I guess I'll do that. If you're gonna destroy the world, I guess I'll kill you. It's okay. And then kind
Which
of
the whole like the nature of her goddess form and like the goddess of war and goddess of wisdom argument. Like I know you mentioned
they have the back and forth about that
later, but like.
But yeah, that kills me because it's like multiple times throughout the movie too. They sit there and like anytime someone talks about Athena, oh, Athena's the goddess of war. Did you know that? And it's like someone else is standing there going like, also she's the goddess of wisdom. And that is again another thing they never pay off. They say it multiple times, and then they just forget about it in the climax of the film, and it just never. It is mind boggling. Like because Garad also is very forceful about it, like, oh, she's the goddess of war. And it's like, well, then no one ever like turns it around and says, oh, well, she's also the goddess of wisdom. Like, they say it repeatedly and then it just stops happening after a certain point, and then they just kind of like, oh, no, she's just the goddess of war. We don't need to remind people. It's okay. Then a couple other things real quick. I'm going to go rapid fire through a few things here about the whole scene around them talking, and then Garad finding Keto's hideout. There's a few things that just crack me up. As one, first off, Keto for some reason has always just had explosives in the ass of this Athena statue, and it's like literally in the ass of the statue.
Yeah.
Like he has a panel that he removes, and it's like, oh, there's explosives, and it's like they've been there forever. And like, and it's a remote detonator and everything, and it's all just sitting there inside the ass of this Athena statue. So that it cracks me up that was his like escape plan for a lot of things. It's like
just emergency bear deterrent.
It's the banana stand from Arrested Development. It's,
there's money in the banana stand.
Instead of there's always money in the banana stand, there's always explosives in Athena's ass. It's just his. Anytime stuff starts to go south, he's just like, I just remember the explosives in Athena's ass. Then the other thing is, Mylock in this whole thing, like he already had a scene where he had an SVD Dragunov, which is a big sniper rifle firing big, huge bullets, hitting these Black Knight guys, and it doesn't even like dent or ding their armor at all. It just kind of the bullet explodes on impact. They're hit with the force of it, but it doesn't really do anything to them. So while they're having this fight at the mansion, all of a sudden now Mylock has these special bullets in a handgun. So much smaller, much less powerful than the bullets he was firing out of that SVD earlier. And yet somehow these bullets now, without any explanation of how he got them, when he developed them, because this has been like
crack open their armor now.
Yeah, exactly. It just destroys their armor whenever he hits them with it. And it's like it seems like there's been like maybe 3 days from the time that they found Seiya to the time that they're being attacked in Keto's mansion. It feels like maybe 3 days have passed based on like meals and stuff like that. They never explain any of that. They never give you any concept of how much time has actually passed. It could have been weeks. It could have been months. but at the same time, it like they don't explain anything of where this new technology that Mylock has came from that is magically now destroying the Black Knights. Um, and Mylock also like same with Docrates. Like they set Docrates up like he's like some like him like Cassius also before he gets augmented even. They all kind of seem to be kind of superhuman. Like they all seem to have they at least or at least like with Docrates it seems to be they seem to be setting him up to be this like great fighter or something like that in the beginning there
Yeah.
before he gets taken out in one hit. Um but like in this scene getting away now, Mylock is like him fight he's fighting one like a whole army of guys fighting these Black Knights couldn't do anything against them, but Mylock can fight three of them, and he gets hurt, admittedly, at least. So it seems like there's some stakes to the fight, but at the same time, he pretty handily destroys them. like, so I that in my head, I'm like, is he superhuman? Like, they don't really lay out some of the ground rules of how the whole knight thing works. Whether it's like, oh, are these like are knights like people? Like they talk about Seiya being destined to be the Pegasus Knight. Well, is it like, is this a thing where the knights are, exist in the world and they have these powers and they just need to be shown how to unlock them and maybe they get some benefit from them or go back to the Star Wars reference, like when Anakin is a kid and he's a pod racer and his superior pod racing abilities are because of his connection to the Force, right? So like I
Right. Right.
is that in your like knowledge, is that a thing? Like, are these knights before they become knights like superhuman to some degree, or are they just regular
No,
schmucks that decide they want to be knights?
they're just schmucks. Well, in the show, um, like I mentioned, like the whole thing with like the opening uh episode, they are at this tournament and they're waiting for Seiya to show up because they're assuming that he will earn the armor, but that's a bad assumption because he could fail doing it. And so then they cut over to him in Greece competing against Cassius, and they're both competing for the armor. So that implies that Cassius could earn the bronze armor and become the Pegasus Knight,
Okay.
essentially.
So it's not
So
like,
that's
oh, well, you were born and you were destined from birth to be the Pegasus Knight. It's
right.
like,
And it's more like you can be taught these skills and can be
okay,
taught how to use your Cosmo. Again, because like Marin teaches Seiya how to use it, in both here and in the show. Like,
yeah,
here's how Cosmo works, blah blah blah. And before that, like he didn't exhibit any capability of
okay,
using Cosmo or not. That's just a learned ability, basically. It's not like, oh, I'm not. They're not born with these powers. They actually have to like train and use them. But there is actually like a little bit of some like, oh, you're kind of fated to like wear this armor kind of thing. There's a little bit going on too at the same time,
yeah. But how
which is
much of
really
that is
weird because
like,
it's like,
go
well,
ahead.
if that's true, then it's like, why are we doing this whole competition thing?
I was gonna
And
say how much of that is do you think is what do you call it?
manga versus the anime,
Well, not
or
just manga versus the anime, but like how much of that do you think is like in my head, like I read something like that and I think you know if we show no other reason why you'd be fated to wear this armor, but then people start telling you, oh, you were fated to wear the armor. I feel like it's kind of like the way prophecies work in the real world, where it's like, well,
a
someone was
self-fulfilling
prophesized
prophecy
to
kind of
do
thing.
this, so we're gonna say it was you because you're in it.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly, like self fulfilling prophecy. Yeah,
yeah. So yeah, I mean that's essentially another difference between what's going on. In the movie, it does seem like these people have superhuman, if not powers, at least strength and
yeah,
endurance and that kind of stuff. Like with Cassius, we see that, and but then say it's got magic powers. Yeah, so
yeah, right. So yeah, the line between like what is actually like yeah, something that humans are capable of doing and what some of these special people can do is very blurry in this, and it kind of makes me like watching it. I feel like, oh, well, okay, there's a class of humans that are like superhuman, is the way the movie makes it feel, right? And if they're
Right.
saying
It
like
definitely
in the
does.
movie saying that they're
It hints
destined
at it
to,
for a lot.
yeah, yeah.
And, um, going back to that whole scene, like, one thing that was I felt a big glaring plot hole was when Mylock, it kind of like you said, he shoots at him like he did in that one scene to kind of, like, get them to back off a bit, and he fends them off in this hangar bay, and he's at the door of that hallway that leads to it, fending them off, and then he sees that they're gonna come in and close in on him, so he starts booking it to the plane, and at the same time, like, uh, he was all like, I think he made it to the plane and then was like fighting from the plane. So that's the scene where we're setting up now, and they're now at where he was beforehand at the entrance from the hallway that he was defending before. They're there now, and they see him on the plane, and he's sitting there shooting at them.
You're right.
And I feel like
Oh, hold up, just
towards him, they would have
oh.
closed that gap far before he could have taken off and just have wrecked the plane.
Yeah, right. That's yeah. I don't get. There's a lot of scenes where there's like, oh, they could have done something. Anyone could have done something, especially given how much power we've seen these like Black Knights have.
Yeah, we've
Like,
seen them
could have
run faster than what they were
handily.
showing before
Oh yeah,
he closed the door. Like, when they were closing the door, it looked like they were just getting ready to start their gate, and we've
and
seen how fast they couldn't close in on that. For him
and
to make
even
it from
if
his door to the cockpit and take off, like,
yeah,
they would have wrecked the plane far before any.
exactly. I was gonna say even if he gets in the plane, we've clearly seen that these guys are powerful enough. They could probably one punch through the hull of the plane. Probably
Yeah,
could
they
have
would have just ripped it open like a
made it
can, like a
hard
drink can.
to take off. Yeah, there's it feels like there's a lot of like weird like there's like times when oh these guys are all powerful and then they're not. And then there's time like same I think the same goes for like Nero where like and realistically like you can use the excuse that like well they were just kind of trying to like they were subtly letting us know that Nero was powerful throughout the movie until we get to the end where he kind of turns and decides to actually fight in his armor. Um and like there are times where I'm just like, well, Nero, like if you especially if you look at the fight at the end, freaking Nero could have single handedly done everything they did with all those guys, right? Like,
Yeah,
where's why do we have to have an army of these minions when Nero could have pretty much just swooped in and taken everybody out and killed Seiya before it became a problem too. That's the other weird. I don't know. There's a lot of like hanging not threads,
plot
but just
holes.
like yeah, I would call them plot holes for the most part. Like I don't know, something we're here to talk about or something like that. So I think so on top of that, talking about the scenes of them escaping and all this stuff and being attacked, what cracks me up is like, okay, so Mikos and Seiya go to Garad's compound, fly from the destroyed compound of Keto to Garad's compound. Now, Keto had a big mansion with a big hangar in it with a big opening doors and everything. So he clearly had money. He clearly had a lot of like antiquities and stuff like that. Zero air defense, like zero air defense. But then we get to Garad's compound and it is like it's like the London Blitz. Like there is like it's like all of this gunfire and all for like one plane too, but it's like it's firing off all over the place like, oh, we're looking out for everyone, maybe there's more planes showing up, who knows. That killed me where it was like it just seemed like overkill for one single plane getting through um and the difference in levels like all Keto had to protect his compound was the ass bomb of Athena and Garot's got all of this anti-air. Also they shifted over so Seiya so Marin talks about how he has to bond with the armor and all that stuff or else it's not going to work with him. And so he kind of like, he fights her and runs off without really figuring all that out. But then being knocked unconscious means he bonded with the armor because all of a sudden he's able to summon it immediately, like when he wants to. Like, all because he was in the plane with Mylock, right? And
Mhm.
he just touches the amulet and then summons the armor. And it's like, what happened there?
Yeah, and well, one thing I do want to point out here is like we're this is the first time that we're treated to the theme song from the anime. A
Oh
little
yeah.
bit of keys in it playing in the background, and it's called Pegasus Fantasy is the name of that song. And so this is this is that Easter egg that I mentioned like earlier on. Like yeah, they dropped this in later on to go like, hey, by the way, this is definitely based on the anime because it's the theme song from the anime. And so it's a nice little nod to the fans and like, okay, he's about to summon the Pegasus armor, and we do see it for the first time, the full armor in its all glory. Because again, beforehand they like, oh, he's got his armor on, but that was just his training
Yeah, it was
uniform
like
from the
a
show.
just one shoulder piece and a gauntlet, right? I
Yeah,
think it was.
yeah, it's silly. And then now we're actually seeing what the armor looks like. This is what it looks like in the show when he actually earns the
What
armor.
what
Actually,
kills me though is I just want to point this out that they already mentioned that the golden armor was the Pegasus Knight in the beginning. And the armor he's wearing does not look like the guy that fell to Earth
it's not
with Athena.
because this is the yeah because again this is like these are the bronze armors. And so they're that level before. And I know
Oh,
in
okay.
here they were kind of like, oh, there's different levels to the armor based on his power or something. That's what they're trying to do in the movie. But
Mhm.
in the shows, like that's just what the armor is. That's just
Okay.
the armor doesn't transform or change in any way. That's just the power level of that armor. That's bronze armor, and the knights compete for higher level armor. The one that you're referring to is actually not Pegasus armor. It is the Sagittarius armor, and you
Oh,
wouldn't know that unless you watched the show.
they
So
I have to
that's,
go back and see
but it
when. I'm pretty sure they actually refer to him as the Pegasus Knight
in
in
the
part of
beginning.
the
Oh, okay,
in one of the info dumps that they do.
okay.
I don't
I've
remember if it's Garad or if it's Sienna that says it, but one of them calls the golden armor that fell to Earth with Athena with the baby Athena. They called him the Pegasus Knight.
weird. Yeah,
I have to go back and check. I
I'd
can't.
have to check that too. But yeah, and that I totally missed that if that was the case. And that's why I actually thought that that's what they were doing. There was that I was one of because there's actually two knights there that are fighting in gold
Yeah.
armor, and uh, one of them might have been uh who knows what armor because there's a lot of them that are
I
based on again the constellations of the Zodiac.
I
It's the name.
feel like
All
it
right,
was
so the
heavily
Zodiac.
implied in the movie, though. And this is where some confusion comes in because I also this also confused me about it's. They didn't say it outright, but they made it seem like that it was possibly the Phoenix Knight fighting the Pegasus Knight in the beginning. I'm fairly certain that they actually said Pegasus Knight when they were talking about the golden armor, but they didn't never said Phoenix Knight when they were talking about the other guy.
Yeah,
And obviously Nero is now the Phoenix Knight, after we get to that point in the movie. But it I feel like they heavily implied it if it wasn't
and
something they actually said
if that's the case, then they're definitely heavily leaning into that whole like the armor's appearance is based on your power
based
level
on
kind
who.
of
Oh,
thing.
okay, okay,
You know, and that's kind of what they're going for in the movie. But in the show, definitely discrete armor types, and there's definitely no Pegasus gold armor. There's the Sagittarius gold armor.
yeah, okay,
um, and that's kind of what they're competing for in the first place. When you see it in the anime,
in
like
the
the
anime.
first armor that they're fighting for is that gold armor is that Sagittarius armor, and Seiya is trying to win it, and he does eventually like earn it. So he no longer is the Pegasus Knight; he becomes the Sagittarius Knight. But that's something in the anime, and not anything to do with this movie at all. That said,
Stupid.
though, that armor does look fantastic. It does look a lot like the armor from the anime, and it is another 9 out of 10 amazing cosplay. So
Yeah, I'll talk about this a little bit later, but there is some interesting stuff behind what they did for the armor in this movie. Yeah, I think the look of everything, especially I think the physical armor, uh, like I mean, it looks pretty good. Like I would watch a movie where if he had been wearing that the whole time, I would have been fine with that. That would have been it would have been pretty cool. Like so it wasn't like it was like goofy or out of place or anything like that. It's just there was some weirdness with it, but I can let some of that go. I think my biggest problem with it was very obviously leather
Yeah,
that they were trying to sell as metal armor. Although we're talking about it, it sounds like maybe that was actually the intention.
yeah,
Um,
exactly. And that's
right?
kind of why I dig it, and I like the look of it and what they were
Yeah.
going for.
So
Felt like they were trying to definitely bridge that gap between it being called cloth and it actually being
actually being metal
bronze,
armor.
gold, silver, metal armor. Yeah,
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I think this is one of those movies where, like I said, I think they were angling for it to get people with that had no knowledge, like making it for people that had no knowledge. But then they also, I mean, it's very kind of Harry Potter esque in that sense, where there's a lot that of background knowledge that would help explain some things on the screen.
yeah,
If you knew about that in advance, it would make a little bit more sense. Maybe not perfect sense, but at least a little bit more sense in this in how it's all done. Um, so a couple of things about like the power levels here. Like once uh Seiya's got the Pegasus armor on, his fight with Cassius is like nothing. Like Cassius is like it somehow ups his power level so high that Cassius is defeated in one blow. But then on top of that, like when Garad kind of flips, and Nero actually pops his armor, um, it feels like Garad is like first off, I mean, obviously, when she kind of stops Cassius when she first turns Cassius into one of the Black Knights, he kind of attacks her, and she stops his punch, and so you can tell she's like pretty powerful, right? But like they made it kind of seem like Garad like was super fucking powerful, because her arms were taken away by Athena. I don't know. They didn't really explain that very well, like why she had all the power, other than the fact that she'd been draining Cosmo from kids, I guess. But I thought she
well,
needed
the
that to live.
arms, her fake arms were
The
derived from the gold armor, is
Oh,
what they
okay.
explained.
Okay.
And so that would explain why she's got some kind of power and
Yeah.
fighting ability because she is got arms made out
She's
of the
got
armor,
she's got the
and somehow
technology.
that gives her, despite that she has no actual combat training, like
Yeah.
the other knights do. Yeah,
So,
that's
the
100% a big plot hole.
yeah, yeah. Uh the other side of it too is like they're all fighting, when they're doing this fight thing. There's a couple of things that kind of weird that kind of just caught me off guard. Like I said, the fighting is actually pretty good, like when they just are doing the fighting stuff, but some of the stuff that happens around it comes across as really dumb. So like one thing was, I think they go to, one of them goes to punch the other. Seiya and Nero are fighting. One of them goes to punch the other, and the impact like blows out windows on a building somewhere. But it's like it might be the building they're standing on top of, but it's not obviously the building they're standing on top of. And then the other thing is the Nero, when Seiya kind of interrupts Nero and Garad fighting, Nero knocks Seiya up through like, I don't, it had to be like 9 or 10 floors of building to get to the roof essentially. But then Nero, when he punches Seiya to drop him down into the building, he goes through the ceiling and lands on the same floor that they were on, where Garad and Sienna are. Uh, like I feel like the the way that scene was set up and the way it goes, it's very chaotic, and they do a good job of making that chaos felt, but they also at the same time have trouble keeping up with their own timeline of events and like where they're at physically, how this
Yeah,
is going to work. They were like,
yeah,
it'd be really cool if he knocked him through like 10 floors to get to this rooftop, and then they were like, oh yeah, he's just got to punch him down into the same room, so one roof is fine, it's okay, that's all we need.
yeah. Where are we on timeline here?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I've been combining a bunch of our notes here for stuff. The so going back to Garrod flipping and wanting to stop draining Sienna's Cosmo. It kills me. Okay, Garrod literally walks up to a switch. It's just a switch sitting in a box, and it has a bunch of patch cables plugged into it. And all she does is yank the patch cables, and that just shuts down the entire Cosmo draining
Well,
machine.
here at the Garage Foundation, when your Cosmo draining device cannot phone home, we brick that shit.
Oh, that's good. It's a design. It's designed failure for people who don't pay the subscription
Yeah.
to the Garage Cosmo draining service.
Yep.
Oof! I know Spotify people feel that right now.
But yeah, I mean it's definitely silly.
And then this is also the scene where like repeatedly, like back and forth. So I think uh Garrod to Sienna and Nero to Garrod and Nero to Seiya and Garrod to Seiya. Like multiple times in the scene, someone brings up that Athena is the goddess of war. And whereas like the entire first half of the movie, anytime someone said that, it would be followed up by someone else saying, or someone that same person saying also, and also the goddess of wisdom. And so I expected that to be like a response to someone saying that at the end, like a Chekhov's gun of sayings, And they just completely ignore that, and it's just like, oh yeah, Athena's the goddess of war, and we got to worry about that. That's the only thing we can think about.
Definitely
So I
not wise in any way.
well, I feel like they were just setting that up. They're like, "Oh, Athena's really wise, though," and it's like, "Oh, okay. Well, they're gonna sit there and go like, oh, Athena's the goddess of wisdom, and she's gonna become Athena and go and stop herself or something like that." And it's like, no, no, Athena's just a mindless killing machine. She's the goddess of war.
Yeah, which that whole thing, her transformation. Okay, it's cool and all, and we see her like, okay, she's got this purple like goddess hair now, and the whole magical anime, magical girl anime transformation sequence where like her clothes even changed in the gown, and then they go back and her clothes return back to normal, but and her eyebrows and eyelashes return back to normal, but not her hair on her head. That just stays purple.
I,
Which in the
heck,
anime, she does have the purple hair, but she's had it to begin with. It wasn't some like changing thing, right? It wasn't some weird thing. And this kind of is a weird thing. It's like, okay, well, her hair changed. Why didn't her eyebrow hair and her eyelash hair change purple? And why?
like
Yeah,
it's gods have all the power to revert back any changes they make, except to your head hair, not none of your facial hair or anything like that. I assume her pubic hair also changed back. We don't see it, so I don't know.
yeah. It was just they killed me. It killed me, and it just looks so bad. Like the wig that they've got her wearing is just it's bad.
I feel like
It looks
this.
bad.
I feel like the end of this movie, much like the end of almost any disappointing movie, uh, like a vast majority of my disappointment from this movie comes from the last like 15 minutes or 20 minutes or so, right?
So
Like,
bad. Well, the only good thing is the whole the fighting sequence. It's like, okay, yeah, well, we came here for that. Finally, we got paid. That paid off, but that's the only payoff we really got at the
well,
end.
and realistically, like I in my head, I'm like, I wanted those fights to go on longer, but they spent less time fighting than I would have wanted to see, and more time like in the like, oh, it's a struggle, and she's changing, and other things are happening, and we got to keep reminding you that all the stupid stuff is happening, going on, and and it's like it feels like they shorted us on, like, we could have had a really cool big long fight between the Phoenix Knight and the Pegasus Knight, but instead we got like a decent fight intercut with all this other crap happening, and it just
Yeah,
feel
Well,
like
then, like,
okay.
she obliterates him with her magic too in that whole sequence. Like, she obliterates the Phoenix
He
Knight,
destroys
and
their
Seiya's
armor.
okay. Yeah, Seiya's clearly taking damage. He's not immune to it. We see, yeah, you see the armor like get ripped away from him, and it's starting to affect his skin even. And you're like, okay, we see that happening to him. Clearly, what happened to Nero right before that, where she obliterated him, he's got to like be completely destroyed now, right? Except for a few minutes later,
He's
he
totally
shows up
fine.
again. You're like, what? Where did I thought he got
And he
just
looks okay.
absolutely atomized? Yeah,
He doesn't he looks like maybe he's been in a scrap, but he doesn't look like he's injured in any way. Like
no, he
he's just
definitely
kind of
looks
there
like he
lurking,
wasn't atomized completely.
right?
Uh,
And
you
it's
know,
like they just completely forgot about him after that too, where it's just like, aha, okay, well we talked to Garad and Mylock's here now, so we're just gonna take the plane and go, and it's cool, and we don't have to think about anything else that happened here, even though the guy that tried to kill Athena is still out there.
yeah,
And then like too, also the switch flips where it's like, oh, okay, so we go from like, well, we only kill Athena if we have to like, oh, we got to stop the gods. And then they don't even tackle with the idea that well, she is a god reincarnated. Like,
yeah,
what's the where? There's a conflict there that I feel like they're just completely ignoring. And then
yeah.
also,
And I don't think that's existent in the anime. I'm not sure about
oh
the
yeah,
manga, but I'm pretty sure it's not a thing in the anime. The whole like gods versus humans thing. Like there's definitely I guess so. I guess it is kind of the same. Actually, in my notes, I did take a note here that there it's kind of the premise is kind of the same, but
I
the
feel
main premise it's like Athena is on the Earth and she does have her knights and they do like have the capability of like fighting other gods and stuff like that. But it's yeah. Anyways, the whole getting back to the end there with the whole and this is kind of a big thing with the a problem with the whole plot for the whole movie in general and you mentioned it here in your notes with regards to her arms right getting restored.
it's like it's the entire purpose behind Garad's character is that she has lost her arms and she is sacrificing children, and Sienna knew it. Like Sienna was like she explained everything that Garad had been doing to Seiya because she was a part of it for a long enough period of time that she knew what was going on.
Yeah.
And this whole time she could have just fixed her arms. Like
Yeah, and
what
it's like okay, don't kill your goddess daughter for losing your arms if she can just make them grow back later. And it would have prevented a whole lot of youngling murder and a whole lot of all the other murder and all the underground UFC fights and the whole
all,
plot of
all of her all of her recruitment center UFC octagons.
yeah,
Well, it kills me too because I believe she like literally like Garad says something. I'm pretty sure Garad says you didn't have to do that, and Sienna says yes, I did, and I'm just like, wait, wait, where like this entire movie didn't have to take place essentially. Like everything that happened
yeah,
in this movie, anyone that got hurt
yeah.
or injured or killed in this movie didn't have to die if Sienna would have just restored Garad's arms to begin with.
Clearly had the ability to do it, but
And then this all kind of circles back. So like yeah, so then Nero shows back up and I again, just like you, I could have swore he was like destroyed by Athena before they got Sienna to calm back down. But then like also after this scene, Sienna like essentially just outright says like, "Oh, the gods are coming to Earth, and we have to prepare for war, and we have to collect the knights." And it's like, wait, okay, wait, hold up, wait, where did you learn this? because this, I mean, obviously this is what Garad and Keto had been saying, is that, oh, the gods are going to return and there's going to be some kind of fight. But like all of a sudden Sienna, instead of like kind of like going along with it, or just like, or even just restating it like it's something that Garad had told her, she's saying it like she learned it from something while she had become Athena again. Which I mean, that would kind of explain it a little bit. Okay, well, she became Athena, and Athena gave her some knowledge because, hey, Athena's the goddess
Goddess
of
of wisdom.
wisdom. But in that moment, everyone's like, oh, Athena's the goddess of war, so we can't talk about the wisdom thing. And so it seems like like some kind of, I don't know how I would describe this. Maybe like maybe a plot hole that
It
she
might be
just
a puddle.
wakes up and immediately knows what they need to do. To get the sequel going, right?
Yeah.
Because that's all
And
that is,
an
right?
argument can be made on that same line of thought, like, okay, well, that's why she can now restore her arms. Maybe she couldn't restore her arms before. Maybe she had to have awakened or something enough to that point to where she could have that ability to like restore her arms. But at the same time,
I think
patience would have helped out a lot here from all the murder and
right.
killing.
If we had just held back from some of the killing, we could have not killed as many people to get to the exact same point that we did, right?
Yeah.
I feel like I feel like that actually could explain a lot of things. It's one of those situations where like there's some shows where like, or movies where like, yeah, this like something happens and you can, in your head, you can interpret what happened as, okay, the things that follow is because of what happened, even though it's not explicitly stated. But they have to give you some kind of indication that that's what happened, aside from just magically things happening afterwards. Otherwise, you don't know that that one thing, I mean, you can make the jump because it's only been like 5 minutes since the transformation happened to the time that she says these things, so you can kind of make that jump in your head yourself. But there is literally no other indication. Like, they don't, it doesn't seem like she didn't, like, it did. I was gonna say a weird double negative there. So it doesn't seem like she didn't not have the powers before. It seemed like she just didn't use them for fear of Athena coming out or something like that. Like, the way that the series of events goes at that very end makes it really feel like it's like, oh, this is the way it's always kind of been, not like a, oh, now I suddenly have these new powers and I can do these things, right?
Yeah.
So with that said, I think we get. I think that's all of our complaints about this movie.
Yeah, I think so. We made it through the movie
Yay!
amazingly, which was a feat in its own for me to make it through the second time.
Oh,
I
holy crap! Watching it
um,
twice was definitely one too many times.
yeah.
Like I said before, I would, if you just want to watch a cheesy action movie, I would definitely recommend this. If you just want to watch it once, be prepared to not be willing to watch it again though, because that second time watching it through was like, that hurt my brain.
It's definitely background movie material. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
I can just put it on the background and not care about it because I'm not really caring about the plot anymore. You
yeah,
know, especially if I had to like just have something on the background. This could work, but I have plenty of other things I'd rather choose from.
right, yeah.
So,
So
so trivia.
a little bit of trivia here. So, surprise actors. I'm calling this section surprise actors because that's what I called it last time. These are, none of these guys are surprises. All these guys are people you've seen. I don't think anyone here was disguised in a way that made it not obvious who they were. But we got Mylock is played by Mark DeCosux. I can never say his last name.
The Cascus?
Dacascus. Yes, Dacascus. Thank you. Which
Couscous.
everyone
Couscous.
would might remember from John Wick 3. He played the head of that one group of assassins that came for John Wick at the end. But you
Yeah,
also
you've
might
definitely
remember
seen
him
him before. Like, he's definitely a
like
face. Like,
like
oh, I've seen him.
Double Dragon.
Yeah.
He was, what's his name from Double Dragon? Uh he was the Asian brother from Double Dragon.
Oh, okay.
Not the honky guy, but the Asian guy. So um He's one of those people that you see him, you would instantly recognize him, even if you don't know who he is. You'd be like, oh, I've seen him in something. I also he's the chairman from what's it called uh what's oh goddamn, isn't he the chairman from the what's the chef battle show, Iron
Yes.
Chef? He's the chairman from
Yep.
Iron Chef, so that's
Yeah.
another place you might have seen him. I didn't
Yeah.
write that down, which is why it took me a while to, to
He
remember.
was in Agents of Shield, apparently.
Oh yeah.
You know, a lot of stuff. I didn't know he was an Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter.
Yes.
Oh, the sequels.
Uh, yeah.
But yeah, he's been in a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff over
And
the
he
years. It's
realistically,
definitely one of those faces where like I've seen that guy before.
he's not he's never been an amazing actor, but again, I think he is also very let down by the script writing. Like I feel like if the script was better, his character would have come across as much better. But the way he plays the character, the swagger he brings, the kind that his own martial arts background, I think lent a lot to making the character at least look cool, right? You know, so that was good. And then we got Seiya is Mackenyu, who is I don't know him from anything else, but he's been in a couple of things. But the biggest thing he's been in outside of this is he was Roronoa Zoro in the
I
live
liked his
action One
Goro.
Piece,
Sure. Yeah.
and his Zoro was great. I thought he was great, and I feel like there's not a huge difference between his Zoro character and the character here, other than the fact that his Zoro is feels a lot less disinterested in things going on around him, but that same kind of vibe of like destined great warrior kind of thing, it comes across here. So I think if you liked him in the live action One Piece, it's
And
not that far
also
from that.
in the live action One Piece, wasn't he training with his older sister?
He was. Well, I mean, they weren't they weren't siblings in One Piece, but I mean, essentially siblings, like
Right. Yeah.
adopted
So
siblings, practically.
older
Um,
mentor, sister like
yeah. So same
senpai.
vibe, same vibe there. Yeah, and and her disappearance slash death also drives the vast majority of his character. So
Yeah.
it is, this is very much riding the One Piece bandwagon there. Um, then also, so Garad we've got is Famke Janssen, who you'd remember from Goldeneye,
Vampire Jean
and
Grey.
yeah, Vampire Jean Grey. Uh, also, yeah, X-Men, Jean Grey. She again, she's a bigger name and probably one of the better actors on the list. And it's like her character is done no favors by the script, but what she is working with, she does well. Like I don't think her performance wasn't bad. The writing was terrible, so it just kind of really hampered
Yeah.
everyone here. But um, the guy who played Cassius. This is actually one that I think was kind of a surprise to me. Not really a surprise. I recognized him subtly, and it was he was it's Nick Stahl, and he was John Connor in Terminator
John
3.
Connor, come with me if you
Uh,
want to live.
he also was he was a child actor, so he'd been in a bunch of stuff, but he also was in another thing that I explicitly remember him from. Uh, was he was in a movie called The Thin Red Line, which was a World War II movie about the Pacific Theater from the American side of point of view. So he was a soldier in that, and he was good in that too. In this, he's a little crazy because his character is just so one note. But I feel like he hammed up Cassius. The what little was there in the writing, he hammed it up well enough that Cassius he was funny, a funny bad guy. Um, the guy who played Docrates, Docrates, I don't know how to say his name.
Who craves?
TJ Storm. The funny thing about him is, I guess he's like a stunt actor. He does a lot of stunt work, but he has done a huge amount of mocap work. Specifically, he was credited as mocap for Iron Man in Captain America: Civil War, and he's also credited as mocap for Colossus in Deadpool. But he's done a lot of motion capture work, and he's done a lot of he's a stunt actor, so he's been in a lot of like action movies and doing various parts. Um, then of course we've got Sean Bean, which I just
Sean Bean.
you might recognize Sean Bean from movies where he's died in, like Patriot Games or Goldeneye or Lord of the Rings. You might also recognize Sean Bean from movies where he fucks gods from antiquity, like Percy Jackson, or other media like Oblivion, where he also fucks gods from antiquity. If you don't know who Sean Bean is, you have not seen the same actor die many, many, many times.
Yep.
So that's the actors for this one that kind of were big names or people that I recognized. Let me bring up a couple of little points. First off, the budget for this movie, I would not have guessed that the budget for this movie was this high, because it definitely comes across as a much lower budget movie. But the budget for this movie was $60 million, and I have to believe that a vast majority of that went to getting the
Sean
actors,
Bean.
because
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
Sean
Famke
Bean and
Janssen.
Famke Jensen, yeah, like, and I mean even some of the side actors, like some of these guys, like Mac and You hasn't been in a lot, but he's been in enough leading up to this that this wasn't like his first movie. Um, and then Mark Dacascos will be in almost anything. Like if you look at a lot, if you look at his like history of movies, he's been in a lot of shitty movies, so it's kind of expected. But yeah, Sean Bean and Famke Janssen, at least I have to believe that a big chunk of the cost of the movie went to their paychecks, probably. Um, but not surprisingly, given the look of the movie, the worldwide box office for this movie only hit $7 million. And to be fair, we're talking 2023 box office, so we're talking post COVID, pre like this, before we got some of the bigger movies that kind of like reignited theater going at the time. So it's not a huge surprise. Like you can kind of somewhat blame that on the pandemic, but the other side of it is that this, I mean, like I said, the budget was $60 million. This did not feel like a $60 million movie to me. Like watching this, I felt like some of the CGI was so childishly bad, especially the when he's training with what's her name, the Silver Knight, Merrick, Marin.
Marin. Yeah.
Like uh those scenes in particular, like the backgrounds didn't look bad. The blend of the characters and the foreground and the backgrounds was bad. It made it look like one of those movies that's made mostly on green screen, but done for like a couple $1 million with a bunch of unknown actors and a bad script that someone's been passing around for years and years and years. It kind of like there's parts of the movie that just felt that way, and that's part of what makes me believe that this movie might have been something else before it actually became a Knights of the Zodiac movie. I don't know that for sure. I don't have any real like any behind the scenes story that kind of explains that, but
Yeah.
that's the way it feels to me. The one thing they did that was good, though, I think, it was kind of weird because it also, I feel like it was still kind of impractical, but they actually, the armor that they did, which is funny to me because you mentioned it looks, the some of the armor is screen accurate, but like a lot of the armor that they did, so apparently they based it on ancient Greek armor to begin with, but then that they based it on ancient Greek instances of ancient Greek armor that they could see. Then they consulted with European blacksmiths to make the designs realistic and practical. But then, after having made it from ancient Greek armor and consulting with blacksmiths, they then make the armor out of leather. And in some cases, it still looks very impractical. And I have to believe that it wasn't super practical because like I don't know where the story comes from exactly. This was one of those behind the scenes like comments on like IMDb or something like that, but um it seems impractical in part because they spend so little time in it, right? Like I feel
Yeah.
like if it was more practical, like we would have gotten a little bit more screen time with it. But if it, it's one of those things where it's like, oh well, the bat suit, like the first bat suit, they spent a lot of time avoiding showing him as Batman because the bat suit was so impractical that they couldn't like him act. Keaton acting in it was not as
It was
easy,
hilarious because he was so stiff in those shots. You
right?
could tell.
And so I
You could
feel
tell
like
how
maybe
uncomfortable.
some of that, like what cracks me up is actually because like I don't know, the Pegasus armor at the end isn't quite so bad, but I feel like the Phoenix armor and even the training armor, the gauntlet thing he has, it just all looks very. It looks like it hampers movement more than helps protect, to me.
Well, that's a big trope in the magic armor anime things. Like I mentioned before Ronin warriors, like those armor designs are meant to look like, ancient samurai armor, but they're embellished a lot with fantasy elements that make them very impractical. Even in the sense of just, when you think of combat and you look at actual ancient samurai armor and you compare it to what these fantasy armors look like, and you're like, yeah, no, that's clearly made for TV to make it look fantastical and stuff.
Yeah, and that's I feel like I feel like that also, it's that the situation where you're kind of like as a movie like this, you're shooting yourself in the foot by like I mean, I get that they're trying to match up this look of the anime or the manga, but like not like if they did what they said they didn't. I don't think they were very successful with making the armor more practical. But yeah, it's that. Yeah, I get you. That big fantasy armor that's oversized. It's kind of like the Warcraft thing, right? Where it's like
Yep.
you got these pauldrons that are like huge,
They
like
would
three
inhibit
or four
movement.
times the
Yeah.
size of your shoulder, and the weight of them alone would be bad. But then just the physically where they are located, they would prevent you from getting a full range of motion on your arms and stuff.
Yeah. Or it's funny when because you see that um in Warcraft, like how much the arms can move and how articulated all they are in their armor and stuff. But it's like, where is that armor connecting then to be able to pull off that range of motion?
Yeah, it's like
Like
it's like the pauldrons are always just floating on their shoulders and not
floating.
physically attached to the
Yeah,
body, right? Yeah.
they're attached by the blue tack, uh, a big pad of blue tack between the armor and the shoulder.
A big bad of blue tack that like also it's like attached to a muscle that has control over it so that you can
Yeah,
like shift it like without moving the rest of your body. The as you're lifting your arm, it kind of like floats back. Yeah, I'm being
yeah,
reminded by one of the viewers here that yes, sometimes they literally do float.
yeah. Yes.
Thanks, Joanna. It's magic TM. Yes, yeah, exactly. Um. So yeah, like I so you're grown in the beginning when I brought this up. I feel is fully justified. I definitely struggled to watch this movie twice for for just
Yeah,
doing this podcast here.
yeah,
Um, but again, I don't know. I take the especially the anime adaptation movies, the live action anime adaptations. I tend to take them with a grain of salt. Like obviously, I think One Piece is a shining beacon of what an anime adaptation should be. But you look at the other ones that we were talking about earlier. So like the ones I brought up, Full Metal Alchemist as an example, or Rurouni Kenshin. The live action adaptations are not as good as the source material. They're good. They can be good. And I think Rurouni Kenshin is another good example of one that's good. But it's not like outstanding. It's not like an outstanding movie that I would recommend to like anyone. Like, and I think this is like the bottom of the barrel when it comes to those, where it's like it's it's okay enough. There's enough to it where it's like, one watch through. I would recommend. I'd say if you were looking, if you were struggling to find something to watch that you hadn't seen before, and you were looking for something that was just mindless eye candy for that you didn't want to think about the plot. Okay, this movie was okay. I wouldn't call it good, but I would say it was okay. The fights were good. some of the look was good, but the plot does make it very cringy, very difficult to watch. And the writing was just atrocious. Like I feel like we at a certain point you got to be able to just like lift writing from the original material, uh, which I think this is one of the things that One Piece did well, actually, compared to a lot of the other live action adaptations I've seen. Is that like some of the conversations might not be exact, but the
It just
conversation
is the
itself,
same.
the
Yeah.
gist of it is the same as what happened in the anime. And I think, you know, I think if the interaction was written well enough to begin with, if you just wholesale copied it, obviously the reason they don't want to do that is probably has to do with IP rights.
Well, if you
Um,
look at some of the changes that were made between One Piece, the anime, and the live action series, a lot of those changes were made to adapt it for a smaller screen, and and also a shorter runtime,
yeah,
and without having to do a lot of exposition. And those changes were okay. They were
yeah,
tasteful too. And when you look at something like the changes that were made in here versus the source material, that's really, I think you mentioned it before, it's like they just took a lot of the names and put them in a bag and then drew them randomly and assigned them to different people, and we're like, yeah, this is a thing from the show, we can use this here, as long as we keep like the main guy Seiya, that's the same, and Athena, that's the same, and even though her name in the Japanese one is a Japanese name, not an English name, but that's
but she's Sienna now. It's okay.
which, yeah. Anyways, yeah, a lot of those changes like are why was that changed? Why would you change that? And that's a big problem I have with a lot of adaptations that stray too far from the source material when they change stuff like that drastically. It's like why was this change necessary? It wasn't.
And
Can we not do that?
I think I made this point earlier too. Was like I feel like this movie is a and really I think this part of the problem is that the way they use the source material, but that the fact that this felt like a movie that was written as a standalone thing, and they just slapped on the Knights of the Zodiac on top of that. Like
Well, it's like
obviously
that
some
Superman
parts,
movie that became Wild Wild West. Like that's what you're
yeah.
referencing, right?
No, so there's yes, that exact thing essentially, where it's like, yeah, they already have the story, and now they're just going to slap another IP on top of it and make that and jam in as many references as they can, or change character names or whatever. God, I am trying. I cannot for the life of me. There is a recent science fiction movie that was a sequel, or part of a series of movies, but it was very obviously written as a completely different movie, and they just attached some of the original pieces of the original movie to it. And it happens all the time, so there's a lot of these examples. But there's something I watched recently that was like newer, that I actively remember other people talking about this, saying like, hey, look, like this feels like a movie that was written for something else totally different, and then they were like, oh, let's make it a let's just add this IP in, and we'll just change a few things, and it'll be there you go. And
Yeah,
I feel like this movie definitely has that vibe, and I think that's the major detraction from this movie, really. Like, I think if they wrote it from the point of view that they intended to make a Knights of the Zodiac series, like from the get-go, that you probably wouldn't have as much of this confusion that we're talking about between the anime and the movie. We'd have more. It would be a little bit more cohesive. The story would be a little
yeah,
bit closer, right? Even if it's not perfect. I mean, like I don't like I said, actual anime adaptations themselves still don't aren't like I said, Rurouni Kenshin, again, another good example. I keep going back to it. I liked it. All the movies that they did, all the Rurouni Kenshin movies they did have been great. Uh, but the anime is superior in part because uh like the budget for the movies wasn't great, but the movie itself was actually written to like be part of that universe, like be that story, whereas like this just feels like they kind of wrote a generic hero story based around gods, and they were like, oh, hey, you know what we could do, we could totally slap Knights of the Zodiac on this. Saint Seiya on this.
Oh,
All
yeah.
right.
I think we've kind of
I think we beat this horse
through
to
this
death,
one. Yeah. Um, oof.
right?
So, thanks for joining us. As we have polarized the hell out of Knights of the Zodiac. Um, we'll have more movies next time. I don't think we've chosen the next one, but we'll announce that throughout the week on our channels, I'm sure.
Yeah, check
Uh,
in on Discord or check in on our Twitch channels. We'll post something up once we figure that out.
yeah, and on the YouTubes.
And on the YouTubes. Yeah, this I got worked out the issues I was having with our YouTube channel, so this episode will hopefully be up today. Um, and then eventually we're gonna get this. We're gonna start cleaning up the audio and getting it on a podcast network, so it'll be distributed via podcast network of some kind. Um, for the time being, though, thank you very much for joining me, Dirty. This has been fun. It's been
Yeah,
fun bullshitting about a terrible movie for 2 hours here.
of course.
All right, guys. That being said, I'm going to take off for now. Thank you, everyone who stopped in to watch. Thank you, everyone who watches this in the future. And keep an eye out. More stuff we got coming down the pipe. And we'll see y'all later.
Yes. Join us next time on
The, the plot
the
holes.
plot holes.
The plot holes. I
The
almost
plot
said it wrong.
holes.
The plot holes. It's really hard to get timing down over the internet. That's what I'm going to blame it on. It's the internet timing.
It's two brothers.
Ready? One, two, three. The plot holes.
Plot
Oh,
holes.
got
Oh,
it.
nice.
We almost had it.
Yep.
So close.
Okay.
All right, guys.
Anyways, we'll see y'all next time.